For a long time now, and that's long in quarantine terms, so like a few months, which feels like approximately 42 years. For a long time, the American public has thought of COVID-19 in these terms, more or less. Some people who get it will die, but most people who get it will have what feels like a flu for a few weeks and then they'll be fine. But with any new disease, there's always a question that will remain unanswerable for quite a while, which is what are the long term consequences? Well, since the first cases were reported back in December, we've now had 8 or 9 months to see what the relatively short term consequences are, and it's not good. Over at The Atlantic, Ed Yong has submitted yet another characteristically excellent report on the pandemic, this time focusing on what are known as long haulers. These are the people who were infected, usually with a mild case of COVID-19, recovering with or without, usually, admission to a hospital. And these people thought that they were in the clear after a few weeks, but then they started experiencing a collection of fucked up symptoms. Most of the long haulers are women with no pre-existing conditions. Usually they're in good shape and their average age is around 44. The symptoms are often things that indicate a disruption of the automatic nervous system, something I may now very slightly disrupt in you by pointing out some of the things your body usually does without you thinking about them, like breathing at regular intervals with heavy enough breaths to get you enough oxygen. Blinking at regular intervals, figuring out what to do with your tongue when you're not actively using it. Okay, now that I've annoyed you into breathing weird, blinking weird, and moving your tongue randomly around your mouth, I'll mention that this system also is control of things like regulating your heartbeat and your food digestion. So fucking with the automatic nervous system is truly awful. You know, your heart can start racing for no reason. Your blood pressure could spike. You might be nauseated or have other digestive issues. It's a big list of things that might seem unrelated, but may all have the same source. And it looks like that's what COVID-19 may be doing for months or longer to a certain number of people who doctors thought had recovered. What percentage of people is that? Well, we don't really know, mostly because of how royally fucked up this entire pandemic has been, especially here in the United States. For example, many Americans had symptoms of COVID-19 back in March, but they were unable to get tested. If they even had health care, their doctors often told them, hey, yeah, you've probably got it, but just stay home and wait to feel better. Tests weren't readily available. The system was already beginning to be stressed. So why bother having them come into the office and confirm something that the doctor could already tell was probably COVID-19? So they would tell them, just come in if your symptoms get worse, if you feel out of breath, etc. Otherwise, you'll probably be fine in 2 weeks. But that means that we had a huge number of people who had COVID-19 but have no hard proof that they did in the form of a positive test. So when they started experiencing all of these awful symptoms months later, they were tested, found to be negative for COVID-19, and told that it was probably something else or they were imagining things. Even the antibody tests often fail to show evidence that many of these people had been infected. As we now know, many of those tests are unreliable, and antibodies can begin to decrease after a few months, as that recent study showed. So there are hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe more people around the world, particularly those in the United States and developing countries, who have fallen through the cracks. They are now dealing with a chronic condition that isn't well researched, and they struggle to access proper care in a skeptical world. Ed Yong does describe some doctors who are making headway on treating the lingering symptoms of the long haulers. And so there's certainly hope that the condition is being studied and treated more as this pandemic drags on. But there's one thing that Yong doesn't talk about, and it has me pretty worried. it's the parallels this has to other conditions that are either poorly understood or are most likely completely fictitious. In the latter category, for instance, I'm thinking of chronic Lyme disease. I've talked about chronic Lyme disease before, and each time I make a video about it, I'm flooded with true believers who are desperate to maintain the delusion that the tens of thousands of dollars they're paying to these doctors is really worth it. In reality, these are victims who are being fleeced. They have a lot of the same symptoms that researchers describe seeing in COVID-19 patients. Exhaustion after simple tasks, trouble breathing, a mishmash of things that could be a single underlying disorder, or it could be a collection of various disorders, or it could just be the physical and psychological effects of living an increasingly stressful and unhealthy life. That type of condition is one that can easily turn a patient into a victim of a con artist. Doctors don't believe you. They say you just have anxiety. They say you don't have a positive test for anything that they know to look for. So they don't know what to do with you and they send you on your way. And as a result, you turn to anyone who will listen, anyone who says that they might have a cure. This actually happened to me years ago before I became a capital S skeptic. I went to a doctor complaining of something and she was completely stumped. So as a last resort, she suggested that I see a naturopath. And I did. The naturopath was positive that he had the solution to my problem in the form of some weird herbs. And I took them. Did it help? Maybe. It's honestly really hard to say because the problem I was having was just as likely to be in my head or caused by stress and anxiety. And just having someone listen to me and tell me that he knew what was wrong with me already made me feel a million times better. That's one big reason that I wanted to make a video pointing you to Ed Yong's article and to the other stories that are now surfacing about long haulers. Because on the one hand, yes, this is important to know in order for us all to stop what has become a dangerous talking point, that we can just let everyone get infected and achieve herd immunity because 98% of people are just going to be fine. We don't know that. Even in mild cases that don't require hospitalizations, we don't know that they're going to be just fine. But also, I want to highlight this story because we need for medical professionals and for society as a whole to know that good research is confirming that COVID-19 long haulers are experiencing a very real condition that requires treatment. Because if the majority of people think that these people are crazy, and if we deny them access to real medical care because of a lack of a positive test result or antibody test, then we're going to push a lot of people into the arms of a whole new generation of quacks who are looking to make a quick buck off of sick people.